All right. Get ready to dive into a fascinating world. We're talking creativity, we're talking genius, and we're talking about that amped up state of being known as hypomania.
And the really interesting thing is how all these different sources you've given us connect, from the Hypomanic Edge to those papers on cybernetics and even your notes on self-mastery. It all revolves around this idea of unlocking potential.
Yeah. And speaking of the hypomanic edge, that book jumps right in, doesn't it? It paints this picture of hypomanics as these absolute forces of nature overflowing with energy,
Oh, absolutely.
like unreasonably confident
Yes.
and always cooking up the next big idea.
Right.
Sound familiar to anyone out there?
Now, to be clear, clinically speaking, when we talk about hypomania, we're talking about this heightened energy, this really intense mood and activity that goes above and beyond, your typical get up and go, often linked to conditions like bipolar disorder. But what's interesting is how this book suggests that these traits, even in less extreme forms, might be woven into the very fabric of American culture.
See, and that's what I love about this book. It makes this bold claim. America. Practically built by hypomanics? Think about it. Who else would just, I don't know, pack up everything, cross an entire ocean, and start from scratch in a totally new world?
Right.
It takes a certain kind of, I don't know, drive to do that.
Absolutely. It's that willingness to take risks.
Exactly. And the book even talks about Alexander Hamilton, founding father. He showed signs of hypomania. Talk about high-stakes energy.
That's a great example. And you mentioned you're working on Listeners Project. Have you ever noticed those hypomanic tendencies, maybe those bursts of energy, the drive, even those big, maybe slightly crazy ideas, either fueling your work or maybe even, tripping you up a bit along the way?
Okay, but before we all go diagnosing ourselves with hypomania, let's switch gears a bit and dive into the world of cybernetics.
Yes. And it sounds complicated, but think about it like this. Cybernetics is basically the science of systems. It's about how systems regulate themselves through these feedback loops. And when we apply that to something like personality, it's like getting this behind-the-scenes look at how our brains make sense of the world, how we set goals, and what motivates us to actually take action.
And there was this one line in the Cybernetics paper that really stuck with me. It said that our interpretations of the world are shaped by relevance to our goals.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like our brains are these master filters, right?
Exactly.
They're constantly sorting through information and deciding what's important based on what we're trying to achieve, like having a personal assistant in our heads.
Exactly. It really highlights how our personalities, our motivations, even how we see the world, it's not fixed, you know. It's constantly adapting based on our goals and what we experience. And this brings up a big question. Could these adaptations, our unique ways of responding to the world, be influenced by hypomania?
So we're talking about hypomania potentially shaping how we see the world and how we adapt to it. That's wild. And speaking of adaptations, our next set of sources goes deep into the world of self-help. All those strategies for self-improvement and transformation. And let me tell you, they are not messing around. It's like someone with hypomania, their brain is this whirlwind of ideas, right? Goals that would make most people, I don't know, break a sweat just thinking about them. And their problem-solving skills, more like problem obliterating.
It's like their internal cybernetic system, that feedback loop we were talking about. It's on overdrive. Those big, ambitious goals, they become these like magnetic norths.
Pulling everything along with them.
Exactly. Their interpretations, their actions, everything's amplified.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But then we add in these self-help strategies that you've been researching, right? We're talking self-love, mastering your own mind, personal transformation on a, superhero level. Are these sources saying we can actually tap into that hypomanic energy, those benefits, without, going completely off the rails?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, some of these sources seem to suggest exactly that. They're all about these techniques, meditation, mindfulness, things like that, and how we can use them to reprogram our mental software, to train our attention, focus on our deepest values, become more resilient. Remember those characteristic adaptations we talked about earlier?
Right, our unique responses to the world.
Exactly. These practices are like giving you the tools to reshape those responses, to become more adaptable.
So it's like trading in our old operating system for something way more powerful, right?
Exactly.
And it's funny you mention this because you've been exploring these practices yourself. How does meditation, this whole idea of self-mastery, how does it fit into your creative process, especially when you think about that cybernetic feedback loop?
It all comes back to that loop. Think about it. You write something, you step back, look it over, maybe you get some feedback, right?
Right.
That feedback loops back into your process, shapes your next draft. Now imagine that loop, but it's amplified by this really focused mind,
Hmm.
by emotional resilience. You're not just processing feedback, you're absorbing it, using it to refine your work at a deeper level.
It's like we're becoming more conscious creators, not just reacting to whatever comes our way.
Exactly.
And our self-help sources, they're basically giving us the tools to do just that. There was even one that called our imagination our greatest tool.
And they give you the techniques, visualizations, positive self-talk, setting intentions. It's about shaping those internal narratives, the stories we tell ourselves that drive our actions.
Right, like that quote from the Cybernetics article, how our interpretations of the world are shaped by relevance to our goals.
Yes. So these self-help strategies, it's like they're helping us build this mental environment where our goals are supported, nurtured.
Where they have the best possible chance to actually happen. I love that. It's like we're not just hoping for the best, we're creating the conditions for success from the inside out. And it sounds like intention, attention, concentration, those are key.
Absolutely. It's training your mind to focus on what matters, tune out all that other noise, and cultivate a mindset of possibility.
There was this one line, I think it was from one of the self-help excerpts, it said, "The observation and initiation of beauty can become a skill with regular practice."
Oh, I like that one.
It's like training your mind to see opportunity everywhere. Someone could be walking down the street surrounded by chaos, and instead of feeling overwhelmed, they see inspiration for their next project.
Exactly. It's rewiring your perception, seeing the extraordinary in the everyday. But, and this is important, we have to be careful.
Right, because isn't there a potential downside to all of this? Even if we're trying to harness it consciously, that hypomanic drive can be, well, a little intense. And these self-mastery techniques, could we take them too far? Burnout, unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. It's a tightrope walk, isn't it? That line between healthy ambition and, well, potentially destructive behavior can get very blurry.
So how to walk that line? How do we balance that incredible potential of hypomania, of self-mastery, with the potential downsides? It's like navigating a minefield, but with the promise of treasure just on the other side. So we're working this tightrope, trying to find that sweet spot between creative fire and, complete meltdown. And I'm really glad you brought one of your sources offers a framework, because this is starting to feel, I don't know, a little precarious. So tell me more about this 4E principle.
Okay, so it's not some top secret code or anything, although it
Yeah.
kind of feels that way. It's about approaching self-assessment and growth as an ongoing process. The 4E principle: evaluate, enhance, empower, and emergence. And that plus at the end, that's your own creative spark.
Okay, I like where this is going. So it's like we've each got our own unique creative fingerprint,
Yeah.
and this principle helps us, what, decode it,
Yeah,
amplify it?
exactly. So
Right.
let's break it down a bit. We'll start with evaluate.
That's pretty essential.
It really is. Think of it like taking inventory of your mental toolkit. What's working? What's holding you back? What needs an upgrade? This stage is all about honesty, really assessing where you're at, and being aware of those cognitive biases.
Oh, those pesky little things, the ones that can cloud our judgment.
Exactly. Once we've done that, we can move on to enhance.
So if evaluate is like identifying the bottlenecks, enhance is about, what, clearing the path.
That's a great way to put it. Refining our tools, building new skills,
Huh.
optimizing for, peak creative performance.
Okay, I'm on board, but how do we know what to enhance? I mean, there's a million different, I don't know, self-help gurus and productivity hacks out there. It can get overwhelming.
And that's where those self-help sources, even the Cybernetics paper, they can be really useful. They offer a lot of different strategies tailored to different parts of the creative process. Maybe it's about strengthening your focus, like those monks we were talking about, remember?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's about tweaking your environment to minimize distractions, maximize that flow state. You mentioned struggling with procrastination earlier.
Yeah, my old nemesis.
Well, that cybernetic feedback loop,
Mm.
it can be retrained so that starting a project is actually linked with excitement instead of dread.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. That's amazing. It's like we're not just stuck with these old habits. We can actually rewire them. This is incredible.
It is pretty amazing what we can do when we understand how our minds work.
It really is. So what about empower? That's another one of those words that gets tossed around a lot. But what does it really mean in this context?
In this context, it's about moving from passive to active.
Mm-hmm.
It's about owning your choices, aligning those choices with your values, and cultivating that unshakable self-belief. You know that feeling you get when you finish a really challenging project, that sense of accomplishment?
Oh, yeah. It's the best.
Empowerment is about carrying that feeling with you into every single stage of the process.
It's like saying, I'm not just along for the ride here. I am the one driving. And if we're really lucky, maybe we can even tap into a little of that hypomanic energy, but in a way that's controlled, sustainable.
Exactly. Which leads us to the final E, emergence. And this one's less about doing and more about allowing, embracing the unknown, trusting the process, staying open to those unexpected outcomes.
It's like the trust the journey principle. But it makes sense. If we've done all this work, evaluate, enhance, empower ourselves, maybe we just need to get out of our own way and let the magic happen.
I think you've got it. It's like planting a seed. You nurture it, you make sure it has what it needs to grow, but ultimately you have to surrender to that process a little bit.
Wow. This 4E principle, it's like a roadmap, not just for creativity, but for life. It reminds us that we have way more agency than we think, and that by really understanding and harnessing these principles, we can unlock so much potential. Whether it's finishing that project we've been putting off or just approaching our day-to-day lives with more intention. What do you think? Which of these principles really resonated with you?
It's fascinating to me how all of these seemingly different ideas, hypomania, cybernetics, self-help strategies, they all come together around this idea that we can be deliberate about cultivating our creativity. It's not just about waiting for that lightning bolt of inspiration. It's about creating the conditions for it to strike.
And that's what this deep dive has been all about, hasn't it? We explored the potential benefits and, yeah, those potential risks of that hypomanic edge. We talked about how our brains are wired for this incredible creative adaptation.
And we've given you some tools, strategies for self-mastery, for becoming more aware creators.
It's been quite a journey. From Alexander Hamilton's boundless energy to rewiring our mental feedback loops, a lot to think about. But remember, this is just the beginning. Now it's up to you to explore, to experiment, and see what emerges.